the Big Ten schedule. So the Big Ten has really, in recent years, Steve, expanded its horizons, joined the rest of the conferences in regards to looking at other days of the week, adding Thursday and Friday games. It used to be, as you well know, even up until the last decade, where everybody in the Big Ten would play their 3 non-conference games, and then they would line up the other 8 or 9 conference games after that, and it was very regimented. Now we're seeing non-conference games played in the middle of the season. We're seeing the likes of Penn State and Wisconsin play in week 1. And, of course, for the Buckeyes, it's a Thursday night affair to open 2021.
Yeah, I think their TV partners, Fox and ESPN, really like the idea that there could be some conference games sprinkled throughout September as well as October, November, because those games draw better ratings, and more people across the Big Ten footprint are more apt to watch a conference game than to sit through a meaningless and a lot of times non-conference game. So I think there's been a concerted effort. Obviously, Ohio State and Minnesota will be among the tip-off games or kickoff games on the first Thursday of the regular season. Ohio State visiting Minnesota, just like they visited Indiana a few years ago, I think, on a Thursday night. And, once every few years, that's not such a bad thing. Doesn't appear like Ohio State will have a Friday game this year, as they did in 2019 when they had to play at Northwestern on a Friday night. There will be some Friday games that will get moved. It appears some of the other schools will. Probably up to 2 or 3 games will be moved to Friday night at some point in this calendar year before the season gets started, but don't have a real inkling of a lot of that just yet. But they did come out with a revamped schedule, and for Ohio State, it really didn't change a whole lot. It mainly moved some dates, and I don't have the old schedule in front of me right here, other than I think Ohio State was supposed to play Penn State right before playing at Michigan, as it had been a few years ago. And I think that got changed to where now the Ohio State and Penn State game will be the last part of October. And the Michigan game obviously will remain the last game of the season. So it really didn't have a lot of impact for Ohio State. I think for some of the other schools, it was necessitated because with the COVID schedule in 2020, they jumbled some homes and aways for some schools, and it could have led to some schools possibly playing 3 years in a row at the same location. So they had to jumble some things up a little bit, move some things around. And for Ohio State, though, the changes were kind of minimal, not anything of too much note. So very excited. I think that when people saw this schedule, I think people were excited to say, that's another good schedule for Ohio State. Here we go. So kind of spread out the challenging games. And again, if the Buckeyes run the table, they'll be right there back in the playoff again in 2021.
Steve, I was looking forward to a one-on-one conversation with you for the next hour, but look who crashed the party here.
There's our guy, Tone.
Sorry about that.
How's it going, Tony?
Good. I can go. I can leave if you want.
No.
But as Steve was saying, getting Penn State and Michigan away from each other on Ohio State's schedule, I think is huge for the Buckeyes and is a considerable win for them in that new schedule. I was a little bit bummed to see the Nebraska game pushed further into the fall, into November, because as Steve knows, it's a great place to go and spend some time. And so I'm hoping the weather holds out when I am there, although I am also thrilled that the Minnesota game stayed in September because I don't want to be there in November.
No kidding. Yeah. Well, I figured that wasn't going to change, Tony, with that being earmarked as the first game of the season. And, again, you say, well, they want these schedules done in advance so that they can make all the logistical plans and everything. And yet they go in on 9 months' notice and changed it all up this past week. So, but that one I didn't figure was going to change just because they'd already gotten the approval from the schools, obviously, to do a special season opening game. And to me, I have no problem with that. As I was saying to him, I think the last time was Indiana in 2016 or 2017. So once every 3, 4, 5 years, if they're going to do that and put Ohio State on that pedestal where they are, highlighted in the first game of the college football season, I think that's a rightful place for Ohio State to be every now and then. So I don't have a problem with that. Minnesota is going to be a competitive team. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to look a lot different than when we last saw them. And this off season is so important for so many of these schools to have a real off season with a true spring football, a summer program for these teams, and a preseason camp. What wasn't talked about a whole lot was how preseason camp is usually done before the fall semester begins in late August. It's usually done earlier in the month of August, and instead it was done for all these schools while school was in session. And that makes it kind of hard to juggle 7 hours of football each day when you've got 3 or 4 hours of schoolwork you got to do. So they got through it the best they could, put the best product they could on the field. And as it turned out, it was what it was. But at any rate, the schedule is done for this year, and it looks pretty favorable if you're an Ohio State fan.
I even like that there's a week 0 game that they threw in there.
Now, who's playing that?
Nebraska, Illinois.
Nebraska,
Illinois. Are they going abroad to play a game? Is that the deal?
They're supposed to.
Oh, yeah, because of COVID.
Happen.
Yeah. Where are they supposed to go, I wonder?
Dublin, Ireland.
Okay.
How fitting.
Yeah. So if we're going to try to sell American football to the Irish, don't we send them the Fighting Illini? Isn't that's the key? That's
when I think of Illinois football, I think of Ireland.
I think of Dublin, Ireland.
When I think of Nebraska, I think of the Emerald Isle. And
I think of you could get 11 guys out of a Irish pub and they'd probably be just as good playing football as Illinois. No, I'm just kidding. They hired Brett Beelzebub, so that'll be his big debut there in Dublin, Ireland. And here's Nebraska. I mean, come on, man. The clock's ticking for Frosty the Snowman over there. That's week 0 is a must-win for both. Well, I wouldn't say it's a must-win for Brett Bielema, but his first game, it would be nice to establish his program right off the jump with a division win over Nebraska. But from Scott Frost, man, it's time, bro. You got to start winning some games.
Yeah, it's a must-win for me because I've been on his bandwagon for a while now. I think I even called him Urban Meyer 2.0 at one point.
Oh, dear.
And he's not quite been that yet. So just yet, we'll give him some more time. But
not even Bowling Green Urban Meyer. I mean, it's just.
But like what he did at UCF was impressive, and I like just his football focus and how intent he was on things. But I don't know, maybe it's not possible at Nebraska anymore, But as I always say, anybody can win in the Big Ten West, and Nebraska is anybody. So, as Steve said, come on, it's time, and it's definitely time for Scott Frost to get some things going. And I know they keep losing people to the transfer portal. All of their eggs are seemingly in the Adrian Martinez basket at this point. Can he keep from turning the ball over? I don't think so.
Yeah, is there a tougher place to meet expectations because those Nebraska fans still believe that they can contend nationally, and you're in the middle of nowhere. You can only grab so much of your roster out of Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota, and you've got to go a couple thousand miles away, but the expectations are to win big, and that's what's facing Scott Frost. Tony, I was right there with you. I thought, man, this is a home run hire. He is the perfect fit. He knows the culture. He's a hero there already. Quarterback with a national championship. They love him. Look at what he's done at UCF from 0-12 to 13-0. But he's recruiting well. So the talent's on the roster somewhere. That's what the recruiting rankings tell us. So they should be doing much better than what they've been tripping around with 4 and 5 wins during his first few seasons. So Iowa was on the schedule, I believe, in 2020, the original schedule for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, in 2020 they were. Yeah.
And 2020.
Yeah, they had to cut it
Buckeyes
down.
will miss Iowa. Just to further your point, Steve, in regards to it being a pretty soft landing for the Buckeyes here, because you got to figure most likely Wisconsin, Iowa, Northwestern are the three best teams in the West. Ohio State misses those three. I think one game, what else jumps out to me that can't be dismissed is a date against Tulsa. Tulsa was one of the better group of five teams and might be able to put up a fight in the horseshoe in week 3 coming off of Oregon, if that becomes a major test for the Buckeyes and maybe a bit of a letdown there.
Yeah, you make a good point. That could be a sandwich game for Ohio State. I just called up the schedule myself. September 2nd at Minnesota, then 9 days to get ready for Oregon coming in. Obviously, Oregon had a pretty good team this past year. I think they won the Pac-12. Then I think they lost in their bowl game, didn't they, to Iowa State? Does that sound right?
34-17 they lost.
Fiesta Bowl. The Fiesta Bowl. Tulsa, as you said, was a very respectable team in the American this year. Didn't they lose to Cincinnati in the championship game? Is that right?
Yep.
And then Akron, I don't know much about them. I don't think their program's much to talk about, obviously. At Rutgers with Schiano, Maryland at home with Loxley, and Tagovailoa, younger version. Then you have 2 full weeks to prepare for the trip to Indiana, and I just wonder October 23rd if that'll be a night game. And then if October 30th, Penn State at home would be a night game. And then November 6th at Nebraska could also be a night game. They may give them 3 night games in a row. Back home with Purdue, not much going on there. Michigan State, I don't foresee a whole lot happening there. And November 27th at Michigan, this renewed, revitalized, rejuvenated Jim Harbaugh. Is this year 7 already of this disaster? And, I don't know. I don't see a whole heck of a lot going there. Really, the hay will be in the barn once they come back from Nebraska. I don't think either of those last 2 games at home will be much of a challenge, or the game at Michigan. It could be – Ohio State's just decimated them here in the last few years. And then you get ready for the Big Ten championship. Theoretically, a good team will come out of the West. And so that'll be that. But playing a young quarterback, I always say, it could be worth a loss that you just don't even see, because there could be 3 turnover game just pop up out of nowhere with a young quarterback. And so, again, I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying don't rule that out. So, even Haskins, as great a year as he had, although I don't blame that Purdue loss on Haskins per se, as much as they just were a terrible team defensively that year. But at any rate, it's going to be a fun year, I think, for Ohio State.
Yeah, go ahead, Tone.
I think by the time they get to that Indiana game, now you've got a redshirt freshman quarterback with 6 games under his belt. Likely 6 starts. So that will set them up well for Indiana and then the Penn State and Nebraska. Will those be night games? I guess that's up to Fox and how these weeks get drafted by the TV networks, and whether any of those will be the big noon kickoff. I was thinking, well, maybe Purdue will be one of those random night games that Ohio State gets stuck with, because the games they'd like to have at night all have to be the big noon kickoffs. But Purdue being in the middle of November, I don't know if they'll want to go night game at that point, or if Purdue would say, please no.
Of course, if the Buckeyes take care of business, they take care of business, and they don't care what happens elsewhere in the schedule. But if they lose a game, God forbid, lose 2 games, but it's a messy college football playoff scenario elsewhere, then I'm looking at the likes of Oregon needing to go back to the Pac-12 and take care of business, win the conference. Either a Penn State, Indiana, or Michigan, one of the 3 standing out as a contender in the East. Penn State's got a big game against Auburn non-conference. Michigan has Washington. Indiana's got a date against Cincinnati and need to go out of conference and look good for the Big Ten there. And then also Minnesota would be the one team out of the West that has the most chance of being a contender and looking good right there for the Buckeyes as a week 1 win.
I was going to say one of the issues for Indiana and Penn State are their initial early season schedules, because they've got tough openings where Indiana opens at Iowa, then they have Cincinnati in week 3 and at Penn State at week 5. I mean, they could conceivably be 2-3, and who knows what that does to their season. Penn State doesn't open much better because they open with, I think, at Wisconsin. I'm bringing up their schedule now. Yeah, at Wisconsin, then Auburn at home in week 3, and then they host Indiana in week 5 and go to Iowa. So, I mean, they could be a 3-3 team at that point. And I think we've seen Penn State bounce back really well last year after that terrible start. But what happens when these teams start out slowly? I was looking at Michigan's schedule about 20 minutes ago, or 30 minutes ago, and they've got the Washington game. Then they also have, I believe, at Wisconsin in their first 6 games, first 5 games. Then they're at Nebraska the week after they're at Wisconsin. So, like, that's really, for me, the crux of their season, how they do in those 2 games. I would expect they lose to Wisconsin, but I don't think they can afford to lose at Nebraska, because who knows what happens from that point. Is that where does the program just quit at that point? Does the team quit at that point, even though they'd be like 4-2? I expect them to beat Washington, but just the first half of these seasons for all 3 of those teams, none of them are going to be easy.
Absolutely. And for anybody out there looking for some college football playoff madness from the group of 5, possibly making it difficult on the committee, root for Cincinnati. They have back-to-back games against Indiana and Notre Dame this year. Can you imagine if Cincinnati wins those 2 games?
Wow. That would give Fickell a leg up on replacing Brian Kelly as the Notre Dame head coach, perhaps. And I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I've said this before, though, and I've known Luke Fickell since 1992, 93 probably, and really rather wish they'd won that game than the way that they botched the ending of that game with Georgia. That was just very regrettable from a program trajectory and for his own personal trajectory. I think that and for a group of 5 trajectory, if they'd won that game, you would have said, man, Cincinnati really did deserve to have some playoff consideration. Instead, it's same old right now until they do break through and win that kind of a major game. So those are 2 wins, if they get them, that would put them on the map, no question about it, and would have them, if they're able to win the rest of their games, certainly in the top 6 or 7 all season long, if they're able to do it.